Imagine discovering a treasure right under your feet. Overnight, you're rich, so you think. Instead of prosperity, chaos follows. Your economy crumbles, corruption skyrockets, and people suffer everywhere. If you think this sounds like a really bad plot twist, well, firstly, you're right, but secondly, and most importantly, this is real. What I just explained is a paradoxical situation where you find a gold mine under your feet, but end up being poor. This is actually a development economics concept called the natural resource curse, or the paradox of plenty. It's a bit of a strange phenomenon where a resource-rich country blessed with amazing natural resources end up being worse off economically than countries with no valuable natural resource. So today we'll try to find out what actually happened in Venezuela, and then we'll question whether we have seen a similar story to Venezuela's in the past before in one of the oldest historical texts to date. And lastly, as always, we'll explore how we can learn from Venezuela's mistakes and avoid the natural resource curse in our own lives. Once the richest nation in Latin America, blessed with the world's largest oil reserves, as in trumping oil giants like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Yeah, Venezuela should have been a powerhouse. Instead, today its economy is failing, inflation is astronomical, and millions have fled the country, something that we call brain drain. So why did Venezuela's gift not materialize into the blessing it was meant to be? And what does Venezuela's story tell us about what we should be doing with our gifts and talents? It's me, so we're gonna have to rewind a bit to Venezuela's history. The year is 1920, and Venezuela hit its jackpot. Oil. By the 1970s, Venezuela became one of the world's top oil producers. It also became the richest country in the region and one of the 20 richest countries in the world, ahead of countries like Greece and Spain. But in the 1980s, oil prices completely crashed. And because Venezuela neglected other industries and it didn't necessarily have a strong private sector to fall back on, its economy literally spiraled into crisis. And what you'd find is that a lot of officials at the time would frequently misuse government money that was actually intended for investment back into oil production. Yeah, not a very good time for Venezuela. However, in 1999, President Hugo Chavez? I don't know, took office, riding on promises of using oil wealth to lift people out of poverty. At first, it actually seemed to work. Poverty decreased by some 20%, massive social programs were introduced, free healthcare came around, and food was subsidized. Money poured into Venezuela. Infrastructure, schools, hospitals, everything seemed to be on the rise, to the point that the government even promised eternal prosperity. A big blessing indeed. But there were too many red flags and a lot of poor stewardship of this blessing for it to really be a success. Venezuela's downfall wasn't just about its over-reliance on oil, it was also about how the profits were spent. Instead of building a sustainable economy, the government went on a little bit of a spending spree. Taxes were lowered, government spending skyrocketed, and national debt, of course, ballooned. Rather than investing in productive infrastructure or setting up a sovereign wealth fund like Norway did, a lot of the oil profits were funneled into social programs instead of reinvested into oil infrastructure. And whilst these government handouts seemed amazing for people who were struggling in Venezuela, they just weren't sustainable. When oil prices completely crashed in 2014, so did Venezuela's economy. This overspending, coupled with the mismanagement of money and rising national debt, meant that when oil prices crashed, the whole economy did too. Things just got really ugly. Another critical mistake was its over-reliance and its over-dependence on oil. Venezuela literally put all of its eggs in one basket, to the point that oil made up over 90% of its exports and funded literally everything. Basically, instead of diversifying into manufacturing, agriculture or technology or literally anything else, the government doubled down on oil, which made the economy dangerously fragile. Venezuela became a petro state, which is a country that is completely reliant on oil, and as a result, is vulnerable to every price fluctuation in the market. Not good. Another reason? Yes, there's more. A nationalization just kept taking place. The president was taking over private oil companies left, right, and center, and he managed to take over the very last privately run oil fields in 2007. He essentially just forced out all private investors. In theory, this was meant to give Venezuela more control over its resources, but in practice, it led to mismanagement, inefficiency, and declining production. So when oil prices dropped, Venezuela did not have a very strong private sector that it could fall back on.
Well, over 7 million people now have fled the country due to economic hardships, and inflation has hit millions of percent, making money basically worthless. And speaking of basics, basic necessities like food were really scarce. And despite sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela struggles to even produce enough fuel for itself. Venezuela is an interesting case. It's a cautionary tale, but I can't help but think that there was already a cautionary tale beautifully wrapped up in one of the most ancient books on the planet that really does predate Venezuela's economic crash, the Bible. So the book of Matthew forms 1/4 of the gospel. And the gospel is all about the good news of Jesus' life, death, resurrection, and the message of salvation. If anyone's interested in who Jesus was and what he did and really what he's about, I'd start with the gospel because, yeah, it has a whole record of his life on earth. So Matthew was a follower of Jesus, and he recorded Jesus' life on earth, forming 1/4 of the gospel. In chapter 25, Matthew recorded a parable that Jesus told called the parable of the talents, which is actually one of my personal faves. In the parable, a master is about to set off on a journey, so he entrusts 3 of his servants with different amounts of money. So they're referred to as talents in this story, as that was the actual unit of currency at the time. One servant receives 5 talents, let's call it $5, and we're also going to call him, as Stephen Furtick did once, 5-talent Freddy. Another servant receives 2 talents, who we'll call, on this occasion, 2-talent Tommy. And the last servant receives 1 talent. We're going to call her 1-talent Whitney. I kind of see this as 3 different countries who were miraculously, literally, blessed with the resources that they didn't have to work for. They were just simply given it. God, the ruler of the entire earth, like the master in this parable, literally just handed the resources to them. For example,
Nigeria, Norway, Venezuela, all countries that were just blessed with the natural resource of oil, all with different amounts. But let's look at what these servants do in this parable.
So the master now comes home, and he really just wants to see what his servants have done, what they did with the talents that he gave them. 5-talent Freddy comes forward and he says, "Master, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more." He's doubled his investment. He's gone from 5 talents, or $5, let's say, to 10. 2-talent Tommy similarly comes forward and shows how he has also doubled the 2 talents that he was given into 4. And then 1-talent Whitney came forward.
Let's just say the master is not pleased.
Out of fear, Whitney actually hid her gift under the ground. She buried it. She didn't double it, she didn't invest it, she didn't do anything with it at all. She just mismanaged her blessing, the blessing that was given to her without her having to do anything for it.
So the master praises the first 2 servants for multiplying what he blessed them with, but he condemns the last servant for wasting this opportunity, for not investing, for not diversifying, for not making use of the talent that was given to him for free. Venezuela's massive oil reserves were like the talent that was given by the master to his servants, a valuable gift with the potential to multiply wealth.
Instead of investing and diversifying this gift, like 5-talent Freddy and 2-talent Tommy, Venezuela became complacent and overly dependent on oil wealth. It could be argued that the government buried the gift of oil by using it to fund unsustainable social programs and ignoring other sectors of the economy. No investments and no diversification. When oil prices collapsed, Venezuela had nothing to fall back on. It's similar to how 1-talent Whitney, after burying her talent, literally had nothing to show when the master returned. It was buried. It was not utilized. It was just completely mismanaged.
Like, take Norway for example. They were blessed with the gift of oil in their land, just like Venezuela was. But they did things very differently.
Norway set up a sovereign wealth fund, which is basically a state-owned investment fund that invests in real and financial assets like stocks, bonds, real estate, just the way you can too. Norway's sovereign wealth fund is called the Government Pension Fund Global and is worth a staggering 1.8 trillion US dollars.
Literally the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world.
Now, this fund will forever benefit Norway's citizens and its economy.
So what did Norway do different to Venezuela?
Norway took their oil profits and then invested them into assets that could generate more money. All one talent Whitney needed to do was invest her resource so that she could turn it into something far greater than it was before, and even go on to benefit other people besides herself. Norway also diversified. They didn't chuck all of their profits into one place. They spread their wealth into stocks, bonds, and real estate. Also, it seems like they managed their money really well because they enforced these really strict spending limits. For example, they can only spend 3% of the fund's value each year to avoid overspending. They also brought in professional management, ensuring that the day-to-day operations and management of the fund are controlled solely by financial experts and not politicians that don't have expertise in financial management.
This parable and this story of Venezuela also serves as a very, very important life lesson too.
We all have gifts that we're blessed with, whether they're talents, resources, or opportunities, and we shouldn't waste them by hiding them in the ground where no one can see them and where you or others can't benefit from them.
It's our duty to steward these gifts properly, to seek divine wisdom on how to manage them properly so that we don't have our talents and our gifts going to complete and utter waste, but rather they can develop and they can bloom into blessings not only for ourselves but other people in the world too. Kind of like Norway's fund.
5 Talent Freddy and 2 Talent Tommy were called good and faithful servants and were blessed with entering God's kingdom because they stewarded their God-given talents very well. They were creative and they were bold with their investments to the point that they had a 100% return on investment. But one talent, Whitney, didn't manage her gift well, which led to quite an unfortunate ending for her, to say the least. Just like how it didn't end up too well for Venezuela either.
So the next time that you hear about a country discovering this massive, amazing oil reserve or striking gold, don't assume instant riches. Because if history and the Bible has taught us one thing about God-given blessings, it's actually what you do with them that matters most.
By the way, guys, this is not to erase or ignore the effects of colonialism. No, I'm not being ignorant to the fact that the theft and the Western exploitation of African commodities and resources has a huge part to play in where Africa is now. Don't worry, I'll delve into that in a different video soon. But this video was really just about looking at a different perspective and also just me personally, just finding similarities with biblical principles. That's all. Don't worry, I'll get into the nooks and crannies of Western exploitation in a different video.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope that the natural resource curse or the paradox of plenty has taught you a thing or two about your gifts and talents the same way that it's taught me, especially about how we should be stewarding the blessings, the gifts, the talents, the resources that we have access to and that we've been blessed with. On this side of the internet, we champion critical analyses using history, public policy, economics to not only learn more about the world around us, but to learn more about ourselves too. Let me know in the comments what part of this video resonated with you the most, and tell me about the natural gifts that you have that you believe that you should be stewarding better for multiplication. And I hope this video has blessed you in the way that it needed to bless you. Thank you.